Hello class, in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about APA referencing. So this video is just about your reference page, that's it. And in your article summary that I'm going to get you to write, you're going to have to include a reference in your assignment. So that's where I want to start, is just by looking at what a reference for a journal article includes. So let's take a little zoom in here. So if you have a journal article, you need to first include the author's names. In this case, the names are inverted, so it's the author's last name that comes first, and then their first and middle initial of their first name and their middle name. And then if you have more than one, you can use the and sign to show two authors. And we'll look at another example when there's more than two authors, but for this case you have, again, the last name is listed first, and then the first and middle initial of their first and middle names. Then you include a period and a year that goes into brackets. There's also a period after the year. And then you have the title of the article, and you only capitalize the first letter of the first word. If it has a subtitle, you can also capitalize the first letter of the second part of the title that comes after a colon. But every other word is not capitalized, and there's no italics, and unless the word is a proper noun, like if it had the name Canada for the proper name of the country in it, or if it had a specific person's proper name, then you could include that. But for the most part, you only have two capital letters or one capital letter. If you have a title and subtitle, you'll have two capital letters, but the rest of the words are all not capitalized. Then we have the name of the periodical, so that's the journal title. And that one, all the major words in the periodical's name or the journal title's name are capitalized. So if it's Journal of Clinical Nursing, the word journal, clinical, and nursing are capitalized. And you can just usually follow the example of how the capitalization is on the article itself. So don't change any of the wording or capitalization. There's a comma, not a period, between the journal and the volume and issue number. So you want to italicize the name of the periodical as well as the volume number. So both of these are italics. The issue number that goes inside of the brackets comes immediately after the volume, so it'll be sort of, you might have 16 and then in brackets 4 if it's the issue number is 4, and there's no italics of the issue number. Then you have another comma and then the page range, so you'll have two numbers and a dash in between them to show the range of pages from the very first page until the last page. And then usually your article will have a DOI. If your article doesn't have a DOI, then you just leave this part out. So you don't, if it doesn't have a DOI, then you don't need to include one. And you can keep that as a hyperlink, so that's fine. If you can, click on it and it takes you directly to the article, that's great. So just some basic rules for a reference page. So the first one is all about hanging indent, and that's our formatting style. So the first line of the reference is not indented. It's the second or third or fourth line that comes after it. So let's take a look at what that looks like for a moment. So in this reference page, there's an example of a hanging indent. So as you can see, the first part of the reference is lined up with your left margin, and then you can either tab in from the last end of this line, you can push tab and it should bump the next line over. So you have what is called a hanging indent. And you'll notice there's no space between, there's a double, everything's double spaced. It's not extra spaces between each reference, so they come sort of one right after another. And again, this is one really long one, so there's all the names included. But again, it's all indented after the first line, which is another hanging indent. Other basic rules, okay, so the next one is the author's names are inverted, so last name comes first. And after the last name, you have the author's first initials. So you can use that technique all the way through. You're also listing all your reference entries by alphabetical order. So let's go back and take a look at what that looks like. So when I say alphabetical order, I mean that you start with all the A's, then check if any of your sources start with B, C, D, etc. So the next one here is G, and all the G's are listed. Again, you look if they're all, and starting with G, you look at the next letter. This one's an O, O, R, so O becomes before R, so you list them in that order. And if there's two that are exactly the same, then you go by year, and if the years are the same, then again you can label them A and B. So if you have multiple articles by the same author, then you can list them in chronological order, so look at the year that they're published and then list them by earliest to most recent. Other rules here, so present the journal title in full and maintain the punctuation and capitalization that is used in the journal title. Capitalize all major words in the journal title. So this is the journal title. Make sure you're distinguishing between the article's title and then the title of the journal itself. So the journal is the container in which the article can be found, and it has different formatting than the article itself. So that's one of the things that students kind of get tripped up on, is distinguishing what the title of the article is and then what the title of the journal is, and then deciding how to properly format those separately. So let's again take a look at what that looks like. So here is the article title, and as you can see, no caps, no italics, and the only cap is the first letter of the article's title and then the first letter of the subtitle. The rest of the words are not capitalized, and that's the formatting for an article title. And it's distinguished from the journal title, which is the name of the container or source where that article was found. And that one is italicized and all the major words are capitalized. So here are a couple of examples of journal articles that include DOIs. So yeah, you just list the person's last name, a comma, and then their first initial. So this is just one author, period, and then the year, another period, the name of the article, the name of the journal, the volume. In this case, there's no issue. We have the page range and then the DOI. So just try to follow an example and look at it as a template when you write your own reference. This one has two authors, so you're still listing them with last names first, and then their first name and middle names are condensed down into just initials. Sometimes you have to condense the names down to initials, and sometimes it'll be done for you, but that's the correct way. So Woolridge is the last name of this person. There's a comma, and then their first initials are M and B. And then there's a comma, and then an and symbol can be used here to show that there's a second author. This is their last name, Shapka, comma, and then their first initial is J. And then you put a period after any initials, and then move on to the year. The article title, again, first letter is capitalized, the rest of it is not capitalized, except for the first word after the colon, if there's a subtitle. Then you have an italicized version of the journal title, and italicize the volume, and you have the issue number in brackets, a comma, and the page range, as well as the link to the DOI. Other ones, so here's another version that you might try. So here's another one with 3 authors. So you list all 3 names, and you can include the and symbol again before the third or last name. Again, you have year, you have the title, you have the journal, you have volume and issue, and the page range, and then if it can be retrieved from a database, you can say retrieved from and include the link to the article. For definitions, so you might want to look up a term if it's, or include a definition in your essay or in your summary. That way you put the publisher, so in this case it was from Cambridge Dictionary, and the publishers are Cambridge University Press. So usually for a dictionary there's no author, so you can go towards the publisher. So here you list the publisher, Cambridge University Press. There's no date in this one, so you put ND, N.D. in your brackets, and then you add a period after the bracket, and then you put the word that you looked up. In this case, they looked up the word upcycling, and then the period after that, and then you can say in Cambridge Dictionary, and then the retrieve date. So this is the date that you looked up the word, and notice the commas separating the day from the year, and then you can include the link, so from, and then include the full URL web link to that source. So here's a couple more examples where you have more than one author, and that's usually the case with articles. It's often teams of writers writing articles together. So as long as you have, you can list all of their names up to, if there's 20 authors, you'll just list all of their names. And again, you're following the pattern of listing last name, comma, first initial, second initial if there is one, putting periods after each initial, and then a comma between each person. So you'll have the next person listed, comma, next person listed, and again using last names only, and first and second initial if available. And then you use the and sign before the very last person's name is listed. And yeah, basically just follow that pattern. These should really have DOIs. If that was available, you would put the DOI in as well, and make sure it is a hanging indent. Electronic sources, so you might find, websites, an article on a website. You're finding your journal articles through electronic sources. So it's often we're using electronic sources for our reference page. So again, you're still following the same guidelines that we've got done before. You're including the information that's available to you, including authors' names. If there is no author, then you can use the title of the article. So on a website there might be an article, a specific article that you're reading on that website, so you would include that information first, and then if there's a date, if there's no date, you're using the N.D. Abbreviation in the brackets. It might not have, issue or volume number available, but it will always have a web address, so you can always put retrieved from. What you should not do is just put a bunch of links on your reference page without providing the uh, first material, so without putting any names or titles or years. So you have to make sure that that material, that information is there listed. So if you're, say, doing citing an electronic source, like a blog comment, usually there's a person who posts that comment, so you can include that person's name, the year and date that they posted that. You can put the article's title and say that it's a weblog comment and where you retrieved it from. So there's no excuse not to put a proper reference in your reference page. There's always an example that you can find online if you do a little research and find a good template. There's lots of APA resources online that you can find that will help you find the correct sort of template to use for whichever research source that you found. Other tips, so when in doubt, if you're not sure whether you should cite something or not, it's always better to be safe than sorry. Include a citation and give credit to the ideas that are not your own. So all the sources in your reference page should be used or should be the ones that you used in your paper. You're not including any other extra sources that haven't been used in your paper. Always think about how the ways that you can make it easy for your reader to find the source in your reference page. And that's the easiest way is by including the DOI and or web address, but also including the author's name whenever available, the title of the article or the title of the website. That information will give me access and there are enough clues that I'll be able to find the source that you're talking about. And just make sure that your reference entry kind of matches up with what kind of type of source it is. So if it's a website, if it's a journal article, if it's a book, if it's a dictionary, if it's a course that you're citing, somebody's lecture notes, a personal interview that you did with somebody, all of these things have a specific reference style that you can look up, but you have to be able to sort of identify what type of source you're dealing with.